don't do steps. Oh. Hello.
Hello, Colin. It's wonderful. We literally are meeting for the first time because the car was very late. So it's lovely to meet you. I'm a great admirer of your work. That's all that done then.
You can carry on with that a bit.
I'm sorry, I forgot. Actually, I can tell you that my son who's now 15, when he first started watching classic Doctor Who's, you are his favourite Doctor of that period.
When he started watching.
Yeah.
I'm his favourite Doctor, so he hadn't seen anybody else at that point.
No. Including Tom, including William Hartnell. When he first saw you, he absolutely he went, "Oh, he's my favourite Doctor, Dad." So
okay. Is this working now?
Yeah. You can trust his judgment. He's a good lad.
Okay. Where is he?
He's not here, tragically. You know what they're like, 15-year-olds. They've always got a busy social calendar. No. He said, "Dad, I was naive. I was 12 years old. I was a different child then." I wanted to start off by asking you about what was your Doctor Who when you were a child? What was the thing that for you was something you could retreat into and kind of, like everyone here, the thing that you loved, whether it was a book, whether it's TV, radio, whatever it might have been?
Good question. I thought you were asking at first who was my Doctor Who, and of course, when I was a child, there wasn't a Doctor Who. He appeared when I was in my 20s. That gives you a clue, doesn't it? Who was I used to like Sir Lancelot on television, because interestingly, it was played by one of the original companions in Doctor Who. Sir Lancelot was played by, I'm struggling for his name. William Russell, yes.
This is the great thing, you never have to struggle. This is an audience of footnotes, addendum and corrections on your own career.
Thank you for your help. Yeah, Bill Russell was Sir Lancelot in my childhood, but it's awful to say Billy Bunter. Because I used to watch Billy Bunter and find it very funny. Not that I identified with Billy Bunter, because even though I may look as if I've always been the size of Jabba the Hutt, in fact, as a child, I was quite normal.
Still quite normal.
Well, thank you very
normal
much.
is, as we know again from Doctor Who, normal is much broader than the rest of the world might sometimes think.
You may very well think that. I couldn't possibly comment. So there must have been something there, because there wasn't the depth and breadth of television, and certainly the kind of escapist stuff like Doctor Who, where you could easily wish for this guy who comes in a blue box into your messy world and leaves it less messy than when he arrived, which is basically what Doctor Who is about. There weren't many shows offering that. The Lone Ranger, I suppose. That guy with the mask who rode into town, solved all the problems, and rode out again Kimosabe. So I suppose something like the Lone Ranger would be an equivalent, an early equivalent, cowboy equivalent, another fantasy world, because that world never really existed. A bit like, dare I say it, Doctor Who. So, and then going earlier, of course, I was a sucker for Muffin the Mule.
Oh, I've got my mum's Muffin the Mule.
Yeah.
I held it up with,
I had my own little Muffin the Mule with, you had little rings at the end of the, you didn't have that cross beam thing with string on it. You had little rings for each finger. And I loved my Muffin the Mule, but I didn't identify with him. I identified more with the grumpy, what was his name? All right, anyone of my age know the name of the very grumpy donkey who was a friend of Muffin the Mule?
By the way, the Muffin the Mule convention's at hoylake next month, so we'll definitely have an answer then. Can I ask you actually, just because we're here with the TARDIS, now obviously because you actually are the Doctor, I wonder every time, I don't know if other people have this, when you see a TARDIS and you open the door, there's just a little moment where you go, I wonder if she really, oh no, it is just a prop. Did you ever have that experience, in all the conventions you see one of those things and somehow, will there maybe be that strange bit of magic?
No.
That's exactly what I hoped.
I've been in seen too many of the blessed things.
So you're used to going, bloody hell, when are we allowed back out again? It's just tiny in here. Too many companions.
Rather the contrary, actually. There are several versions of the TARDIS, not all of them as sturdy as that beauty there. And there was a very lightweight one made of polystyrene with an open bottom, so wherever you put it, the ground was, the floor of the TARDIS. It was because when you wanted to climb up a mountain, the props guys didn't want to lug one of those things. They wanted something that looked like a TARDIS, but could get there easily, not too heavy. And they had a framework they put inside it, a metal framework. And then they used to put weights in to hold it down. And very often when you're in the middle of nowhere, I'm looking around the room to make sure that nobody is going to be offended by this. I think I'm safe. Very often when you're in the middle of the nowhere with a large crew of mainly gentlemen who may find the need to find a small room somewhere. The TARDIS served for that purpose because the ground was the floor. So Nicola and I would run towards a TARDIS on location, take a deep breath, hold it, and run in, praying for an early cut, because the aroma was not benign. So it was more of a WC than a TARDIS.
It could have been turds in relative dimension in space. It's better than that.
It was never used for number 2. Please, have some to
You're
go.
thinking of the Patrick Troughton rules. This is. I want to talk about some of your other crews as well, and I hope I'm right in saying this. The first science fiction you did on TV was it The Adventures of Don Quick, in which you were with Ian Hendry, who you then worked with again as well in For Maddie with Love, and I was just very interested in knowing the.
Done his research.
I'm really because I find Ian Hendry was a fascinating character, and the fact that you worked with him twice, and in For Maddie with Love, I think you were in quite a few episodes of that as well. And I just wondered about your experience with him as well, because he's someone who, went through Police Surgeon, which kind of became the Avengers, and had a certain period of time in what you would call genre TV.
He did. First of all, Don Quick, I'll talk about that. 1970, 71. It was he and Ronald Lacey travelling through time and space. I think it was just space, actually, as a sort of latter-day Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. So he was a kind of inept central character, and number 2, played by Ronald Lacey, can't remember what his name was in this, was the one who kind of sorted out the mess he left behind. And on this particular planet we were on, human beings were currency. So I will buy your house off you for 4 men and 3 women. So there was a bank, and in the bank were all these people standing there. There were money on deposit in the bank. And my role was an item of money on this planet. And I only had one line. And I said to the director, can I change my line? Now, I wasn't at all well known. I was barely known at all. I wasn't known. I was unknown. Don't know why I was there. And the director, Q. Lawrence, I think it was, Quentin Lawrence, I said, can I change my line? He said, why? I said, I think it's open to derision. He said, just say the line that's written, stop, please. Go away, who is this boy? So I said the line, and there was a chorus from all the thousands viewing of Yes You Are. Because my line was, we are revolting! I wanted to change it to rebelling, because, we wanted to escape being money. So, we are revolting, I cried. And when I watched it, I thought, oh, God, yes, you are. And that was my experience of Don Quick. I didn't really meet Ian Hendry on that job, but I did on the later one. He was a remarkable actor. I remember him very clearly from Get Carter, that long chase at the end of the film, where he's being chased by Michael Caine and all those slag heaps, and gets shot and tumbles down. He was in so many brilliant things, but he was at a point in his life where I think he'd sort of half given up on the idea of being an actor, but he was doing it because he was an actor, and he struggled with the lines. So the poor boy who was playing his son, came into a scene where he was talking to his son, and the son had to hold cue cards just out of shot from the camera while giving a performance and passing them like that, so that Ian looked brilliant on camera. I mean, he knew how to deliver if he could remember the lines. So he looked very good, and the poor lad didn't. That was in, what was the series?
For Maddie with Love.
For Maddie with Love. That's right, with Naomi Dawn Porter. It was Maddie, and I was her son. Gosh, that was a long time ago.
I think it's been back on, or it's due back on Talking Pictures, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
You must get, every now and again, you must get someone just texting you going, you're on Talking Pictures again, because that's that wonderful world of kind of, 1970s television. And I think you had a very small, one of my favourite, I hope I'm right in this, Public Eye was one of your,
Yes, it was.
which is, has anyone seen Public Eye? It's the most fantastic, it's like this, it's a real kitchen sink Private Eye. There's one where Alfred Burke has to investigate whether people should be allowed to have insurance for their deep chest freezer. It's that kind of kitchen sink. Somehow it ends in suicide. But it's quite a remarkable kind of, and I love seeing, seeing your career, seeing that build, and then the Brothers, obviously, which was, a huge hit. And was that your first real sense of like, this is working out now?
Well, War and Peace was quite good, which I did in 1971, when I had the honour of being thrown around a room and beaten up by Anthony Hopkins. And I was playing my first my second. My first role was a rapist, my second role was a vile seducer, and it was continuing along those lines, quite happily actually, because those are the parts that draw the eye, and I played lots of unpleasant people, culminating in The Brothers, in which I played Paul Merrily, who was a merchant banker. He wasn't a seducer, but he was a user. He manipulated people so they did his bidding, but he did it legally and cleverly, and I rather enjoyed it, because when you've been particularly unpleasant all day, in a nice way, smiling, you go home in quite a good mood. But when you've been the doctor all day, busy being nice, it can make you rather irritated.
Well, that's the great thing. John Waters, who made Hairspray and Pink Flamingos, he used to go and lecture in prisons to people who were there for a long time, and he said, you've all made a terrible mistake. I've committed all my crimes on celluloid. And I think, that thing of, again, as you said, I think of what people used to talk about, Roger Delgado, and of course you work with Anthony Ainley, and, to revel in that evil, and exactly so, go, oh good, that's the evil out of my system, that actually happened to kill anyone at all. So that's just an advice for all of you.
I bet he went down very well going into a prison and said, you did it wrong, I made millions making films. Oh, I bet they loved him.
Do you know what they did? Those films really are, they're, if anyone's ever seen Pink Flamingos, it's quite a treat in its own way. Now, also Blake Seven, that was, you were in. I was going to call this City on the Edge of Forever, which is called Star Trek. But you were in
City at the Edge of the World.
Right, yeah, which is totally different, obviously, and in no way influenced by Star Trek, as Blake Seven never was. And so, what was it, that bit where that was a real, the excitement of that on a Monday night, and there was proper, cult science fiction but mainstream as well. What was your experience on that like?
It was directed by Vere Lorimer, who had directed some of the Brothers, so I knew him. And he'd asked me to come in to play this part, and I arrived at the wardrobe department, and I was playing Bayban the Butcher, who, the name alone says it, who was in a bit of a strop, because he was regarded as the second most feared man in the galaxy, after Blake. So he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder about Blake. So when they offered me some costume accessories, bits of metal and skulls and knives and things like that, would you like some of these? I said, yes, all of them. So I covered my costume in articles of maiming, torture and death. And it was all black leather, and it was covered in studs. It was rather lovely, actually. They wouldn't let me keep it, sadly. Otherwise, I might have had an entirely new career somewhere.
Possibly in the films of John Waters, actually.
Or in a certain pub I know quite well. Yes. Anyway, so I'd filmed about 3 or 4 scenes, and suddenly the director said, Via said, hang on a minute, were you wearing all that in the other scene? I said, yeah. I said, oh, well, we better keep it then, I suppose. He hadn't noticed that I'd gone a little over the top. I remember Paul Darrow being a little irritated, because in that particular episode, I chewed more scenery than he did. And indeed, my character was supposed to. You know, they were flying into... My mother, wonderful woman, my mother, she said, babe, treat every minute as though it's your last. See you in a minute, Villa. Lines like that, which... that was with Michael Keating, who was... No, not Michael Keating. Yeah, Michael Keating. I was thinking of the one who played Batman, that was another. Keating, wasn't it? But I got on very well with him, he was a lovely fellow. And then, later on, Darrow came to play a part in one of my Doctor Who's, and decided to exact revenge by playing Malin Tecker as if he was Laurence Olivier playing Richard III, which he did very well. And I remember the producer, John Nathan Turner, came up to him after the producer's run. You should have to do the whole episode in one take, as it were, in the rehearsal room, to show the producer what we were going to deliver in the studio the next day. And he took Paul aside and said, you're playing that as if you're Laurence Olivier playing Richard III. Yeah. He said, well, don't. You play it like Malin Tecker. And I admire his chutzpah, but Darrow continued to do it. And as a result, a large chunk of his performance was cut, which was a shame, really. But he thought that going into somebody else's series, you had to... I mean, I am deliberately OTT'd. It was written that Baben was like that. But, well, it worked, anyway.
Well, you have said in the past as well that, you know, that kind of Brian Blessed rule of, you know, go big because you can then take it down rather than start small and build up.
I don't think that's Brian Blessed's rule.
Well, yeah, Brian Blessed does not say he won't go down again.
It's my rule. I always believe that it helps a director if you can give them a lot and then they can tell you what they want. Whereas if you're not doing anything, it's very hard to build you up. So I do believe that, actually. I believe in offering, you know. I've worked with Brian, I know Brian. Brian believes in marking it at the beginning. By going like that! So that there's space for him to develop later.
I saw him once explain to the astronaut Chris Hadfield how he trained, I think it was Dennis Quilley, to do Jesus when he's on the cross. And it was the most wonderful thing. Chris Hadfield, Canadian astronaut, didn't really know Brian Blessed, but had a lovely time with him. And he said he found Dennis Quilley, he said, I don't know how to play Jesus on the cross. I don't know what to do. He said, for God's sake, Dennis, you're Jesus! You just get on that cross and you go, why have you forsaken me? That's how he played it. It was very good. Your kind of route into Doctor Who was playing, you know, as you said, you know, initially you thought that you would never get to play that part because you had a part in the series, and in some ways that actually was, again, by you giving big and doing all that, that's what led to you becoming the Doctor, wasn't it?
Yeah. My agent rang me up and said, you've been offered a part in Doctor Who. And it fits in perfectly with the other work you're doing. So, 3 episodes, do you want to do it? I said, yeah, I suppose so, but it means I'll never play the Doctor. And my then agent said, well, they're not going to ask you to play Doctor Who, are they? I said, no, you're probably right. So I went along and played Maxil, and that wasn't, I didn't go big on that. I went quite kind of cold and tight on that. But I went for it, I mean, because John Nathan Turner did take me aside after the producer's run and saying, what's this programme called? I said, Doctor Who? He said, yeah, you're playing it as if it's called Maxil. I said, well, we're all in our own lives. Maxil thinks he is more important than the Doctor. He said, yeah, but he's not, is he? So I was persuaded, in John Nathan Turner's words, to allow some space on the screen for Peter. And I generously gave him some. But Maxwell had total disdain for this non-entity, the Doctor, and his perceived big head. So he treated him accordingly. I rather like that. But it wasn't a blessed performance. I would like to describe it more of a kind of Alan Rickman performance. Yeah. Total disdain.
I love this. We're slowly building that. So we've got Blessed there, we've then got Darrow there, and then now at the moment, you know, Colin Baker, we're not quite sure. Perhaps he can sometimes.
Colin Baker goes in anywhere. I'm not constrained by the perceptions of others.
Now,
I can say that at the end of my career. I'm not going to lose any work because I don't have any. Well, I have as much as I want.
I also wanted to ask, really, what unfinished business did you feel? You know, when it was such an abrupt end. You know, did you feel that there was, because I think like every character, you know, the way that things open up and you explore them, and then you must have felt, you know, that harshness of the end. Did you think, well, hang on a minute, I'm only just getting now to where I want to take the Doctor?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where Big Finish came in. Big Finish gave me the opportunity to do what I wanted to do with the Doctor, because I always find the interesting people in any drama are the ones you don't know everything about at the beginning. I always use the example of Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, because you think he's a total, trying to think of acceptable words, but an unpleasant person whose pride stops him being nice to anyone and who connives at the downfall of others. But he's not. We learn at the end he's the only truly decent person in the story. He's not acting out of self-interest ever. He's constrained by all sorts of things we didn't know about. And that's interesting. And again, I'll use the Alan Rickman in Harry Potter. Severus Snape was that kind of character. Yes, he had issues, but they were because of a reason we don't know about till the end. That's interesting. A character that doesn't have an interesting, I hate to use the actor's word, arc, but it's a good word, that doesn't have an interesting arc of development, is less interesting as a result. So I did want the Doctor to be not easy to get a handle on initially, because we've got, 40 odd years of history of the Doctor, so we know what the Doctor is. So each characterisation of the Doctor brings different things to it, but the core should be the same. And I trusted the audience to know that, while the outward persona kind of developed. The problem was that the Twin Dilemma was tacked on at the end of Peter Davison's last season. And the Doctor they saw in that wasn't easy. The last few seconds we had a glimpse of what was to come. But there was this thought that, oh, I don't like this new Doctor, which is brave. And it was John's idea, but I went along with it willingly because I thought it was interesting. But then they had to wait 3 months while the opinion of the Sixth Doctor was festering. Don't like him, he strangled his companion. No, that's not the Doctor, certainly not my Doctor. Don't like him. And then we came back, and the writers, they are asked to write a Doctor Who story. They're given the character of the Doctor and the companions. So that is a given. And then the rest of the characters are created by them. And as a result, it's very tempting for writers to make that the interesting part for them, the creation of the new characters and their development. So they look at old Doctor Who's, they see one of me in which I'm haranguing my companion and she's whinging a lot. So that appeared in every script in the first season. I go, oh, she goes, oh. That's the relationship. So in the end, Nicola and I had to find a way of delivering those lines while taking the edge off what looked like the lines were. So we used to do it with a sense of humour, or play against the line, say it, but with a twinkle in the eye, that kind of thing. Because we wanted to edge the relationship into something more mutually respectful and kind of semi-parental. you know, like a father and daughter.
I think there is something more enigmatic about that approach as well. As you said, you know, this idea that you're kind of uncertain of what someone is. I remember someone writing this about Robert Donat once, the great actor Robert Donat, and they said he was so great when he played heroes because you still thought he might have a secret. There might be, you know, whereas if you watch someone like Richard Todd, he's just a, come on everyone, let's go over the top and we're all going to do it, and just, he's a hero, that's it. Whereas someone like Robert Donat, and I think also in the way that you played the Doctor, you're kind of going, you can never be quite sure who you were handling and who you were dealing with.
And that should be the case. He's a Gallifreyan. He's not a human being. He happens to look like a human being, but he's got 2 hearts and heaven knows how many other multiple organs around his body, if only. And, you know, he's not going to behave in the same way as the bloke on the bus to Isha. You know, it's just not going to happen. So I liked to find the moments to show that, you know, where the reaction was not one you'd expect from a normal person, but there was a reason for the Doctor doing that. I'm going to die in front of you. That's a good story, isn't it?
And then they all stand over you, waiting for you to regenerate. Well, this turns out it was a con, the whole blinking thing. It was just a part he was playing. There's so much more I want to ask you, but I think I have to give time to the audience, obviously, to ask their questions. So, right, we have a question over there from the man there in the
cricket
yes.
shirt. That's fine if you want to wear a cricket shirt.
Hey, Colin, Doctor Who's been so much part of your life now, and the Big Finish stuff's brilliant, so well written. How much of you now is Doctor Who? Surely some of you in real life is Doctor Who. It must feed into your normal life, in terms of your personality and who you are and how you behave.
I'll just repeat that. So the question was just how much of Doctor Who is now actually held within you, Colin Baker?
In real life.
Oh, none. None. I've only got 1 heart. And one about every other organ, as far as I know. I don't know. When you play the Doctor, obviously you draw on elements of yourself. When you play any part, you do that. So there probably are lines which are blurred between the 2 characters, but it's really for other people to say rather than me. Ask someone who knows me well.
Louise Jameson is here in 10 minutes, so you can ask them. Who else? Yes, over there, man with glasses there.
Colin, I wonder what enjoyment you got out of your participation in the Power of the Doctor.
How much?
Participation in the Power of the Doctor.
How much participation?
How much you enjoyed participating?
How much I like it? Oh, I loved it. Oh, it was nice. It was nice to be a part with everyone of celebrating a programme that we'd all shared at various times in the past. And obviously, you know, I have an enormous affection for the programme and its fans, which is why on the previous celebration, Peter and Sylvester and I did the 5-ish Doctors. Because you know, we had been talking to each other regularly about, have you been asked? No, I haven't. No. And Peter came up with the idea. And I have to say, all my previous Doctor Who programmes I've made, I watched when it went out, I watched when